Welcome, everyone. My name is Faye Kuosman, and I am the horticulture agent here in Woodford County. And I was going to be teaching this class until I started making the PowerPoint and asking my husband to do the video that we were going to do in our garden to show our system. And I said, well, you are the one that has installed this and knows more about it than I do. So he volunteered, my husband, Joe Kuosman, to teach the class. So you can see Joe there, and Joe, I'm gonna share my screen to pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, Joe, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Okay, welcome again. My name is Joe Kuosman. I'm lucky enough to be married to Faye, getting a few brownie points for doing this class. But I'm just going to go over kind of a quick background of when I started getting into using irrigation, kind of the basics of irrigation. I'm by no means an expert, but I can definitely bring a in-person kind of evolution perspective to irrigation and kind of the benefits and really the benefits that I've seen and some of the challenges I've seen as well. So can we go next slide? So how I initially got into irrigation is I had these ferns that I would hang on my front porch several years ago, and inevitably it would get hot and I'd forget to dry, or I'd forget to water them, and they would die, and it just drove me absolutely bonkers. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try, and I'm going to set up irrigation for these ferns. And amazingly enough, I don't think I saved water doing it, but I had the nicest ferns in the whole neighborhood. And all the old ladies that lived on my street were so jealous of my ferns, and it definitely converted me to the benefits of irrigation and just the ease and ultimately the health of those ferns. So that was kind of the start, and then kind of went on from there. And I'll show you guys some videos of what Faye and I have done at our house, which is more related to just the garden and raised beds that we have. So you think about like why most people get into irrigation is because they want to get away from the sprinkler. It's been the mainstay for many, many years. But I think we've all realized that we end up using a lot more water than we should need to. You can see this picture here. Yes, I'm sure all those plants are extremely well watered, but there's also a stream of water running away from those plants that obviously isn't providing a benefit to them. Also saves time, right? Maybe you're on vacation, or you just don't have enough time to go out there and stand with a hose and water your garden. The idea is that irrigation, especially drip irrigation, can hopefully help you save time. And then the other benefit is the health of the plants. If they're getting water as they need them, then they're going to be healthier. It's one of those things that Faye taught me long ago. One of my other side hobbies is I grow giant pumpkins, and I always have issues with fungus and other kind of just diseases. And Joey said one of the reasons is, you're constantly watering these things from the top, and your whatever germs or whatever fungus is on there, every time those little splashes hit those leaves, it's spreading them to all the other leaves. So the idea is that, not only are you getting the plants the water that they need when they need it, but you're doing it in a more beneficial way to the plants themselves. So those are all great objectives, but drip irrigation doesn't solve all those unless you actually do it the right way. And these are some of the things that I'll discuss that I've learned over the years that have helped me kind of achieve some of those benefits. So if you want to go to the next slide. So at the end of the day, drip irrigation is just like plumbing, right? You have a water source that comes into your house and then goes to everything else that you use it. It's the same thing with drip irrigation. So for most folks, you're going to hook it up to some kind of outside spigot. You can see this drawing that we have here. But basically, the ideal setup, it has the water coming in. A lot of folks are going to have to put some kind of pressure regulator on their system. Each system is set up to run at a certain PSI. And it's amazing, if you go to different places or different homes or different regions, the water pressure that's actually coming through those lines can vary a great deal. And if there's too much water pressure, basically you're going to have blowouts, or the fittings are going to come undone, or the pipe's going to burst. So it is important to have that pressure regulator on there based on what your system requirements are. With any system, just like with a home, it's a good idea to have a backflow preventer. I don't normally use one, but anytime you have water source going out from basically city water, it's a good idea to have some kind of backflow preventer. And then it's also recommended that you have some kind of filter. Ideally, there's not a lot of debris in regular old city water, but if there is, you want to get that out, because a lot of the emitters and orifices in drip irrigation are rather small. So if you do have debris that's coming through the system, it will clog up some of those little holes. And then from there, just goes through your kind of different fittings. We'll go through those a little bit more whenever we watch the video. Drip irrigation is all about plumbing. So got to have our water source. Here it is. Comes up through here. It's always good to have a shutoff valve right at the front, so we can turn it off and on as we need. And then also just have our regular hose if we need it for kind of daily use. I'm a big proponent of having as many shutoff valves as you possibly can. So we have it coming from the main water source to our first junction. We're going from a regular hose to the irrigation hose, and you can see there's different adapters that you have here, and basically allows you to attach to the regular 1/2-inch irrigation hose here. So we take out here, I ran over it with way too many times with a lawnmower, so I decided to bury it. So we have it buried from here to the garden. There's my little girl, Elise, messing with all our irrigation poles. But I'm all about being able to utilize, once we get the water source out here, as many options as we have. So obviously we're doing drip irrigation, but I want to be able to do other things as well. So come down here, got a splitter. So you got the main water coming in from what we just described to a timer, okay? So this timer, I have it running right now, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is the main irrigation source here, so we can set up on a timer. But then I also wanted to just be able to do general watering of the garden. So I have another line set up where I can turn it off and on. It goes to our setup over there. But basic idea, like I said, is plumbing. So it comes in here, and then the main water line goes down through the center of the garden. Again, 1/2-inch irrigation tubing, just like we have here. When we set up this raised bed system, put it all the way down through there, and then so it comes down, and then I got tees to basically tee off on either side. So there's a tee here, tee here. I decided to go a little overboard and put individual turn off and shut off valves on each one of these. That way, depending on what we're growing, we can decide what we want to irrigate or not. The one other thing I want to point out is that all these different connections, well, they're made to hold very well. Every once in a while, you just need a little extra force to hold them together. These little worm gears are fantastic about just holding those all together. The other thing I will say is that black tubing, when it gets hot, and it gets hot here in Kentucky, this will expand and contract. So even if you have everything set up and it's fantastic in, say, May, June, once it comes to July, August, and it's hot, especially if the tubing is exposed, it's going to expand and contract. So just be aware that sometimes you're going to have some blowouts with your tubing. So that's one of my words of wisdom is, even if everything's running fine, you can't just forget it and set it, or set it and forget it. You need to come back and check it periodically to make sure that everything's still running and you're not having any kind of blowouts. But the other thing I will say is that drip irrigation, you're trying to save water. So at the end of the day, you have to plant based on where the drip irrigation is. So you'll see on each one of these tubes, there are, so I'm going to pull this up here, and you'll be able to, let me turn it on here. And
you'll be able to see where the water's coming out, okay? Where the water's coming out is basically where that drip irrigation is working. If there's not water coming out, then that's not where you should plant. So basically what you need to do is you need to put down your drip irrigation, figure out where the little water holes are. You can see one here. This is what they look like, okay? That's where you know the irrigation's coming out. So you need to plant based on where the irrigation set up. We're not doing soak hoses here, so we're not trying to water the entire beds. All we're trying to do is water exactly where the plants are. And at the end of the day, that's how we're going to get water savings. So we have this whole bed set up the same way, where we can turn off and turn on each one of the beds based on the irrigation. But that's one of the things I learned very early on was I tried to plant and then figure out where the irrigation was, but you need to basically set the irrigation up and then plant where the irrigation is, because drip irrigation is not going to soak the entire bed. That's not the objective. It's just meant to put water exactly where the plant's going to grow. As far as how often you water, is one of the things, the challenges of drip irrigation is if it rains, especially with a timer on, it's still going to water. So you still need a certain amount of maintenance. You can buy some high-end water control mechanisms, but at the end of the day, it's going to keep watering. So it's not just, like I said, set it and forget it. You still need to keep an eye on it. Most of what I use here is Rainbird. I'm not a representative Rainbird by any means, but that's what I buy. I've tried to buy a lot of crazy stuff off of Amazon that I would think would work. My advice is once you stick with whatever brand you're going to buy, stick with that brand. Just give you one example. So these little valves, and I'm so glad I got these valves because it basically lets me turn these beds on and off. I bought a bunch of valves, and they're not cheap, and I needed 40 of them for these beds. I bought the wrong size, I bought the wrong brand. They didn't match up with the tubing that I bought, which was Rainbird. My advice is spend a few extra dollars. Make sure you get the brand that matches up with whatever you have, and it'll make your life a lot easier. One of the things I'll point out is you can buy a bunch of basically shutoffs. So at the end of each piece of tubing, you need something to basically pinch off the end. You can buy these, they're a little more expensive, but you just as easily, you can get some zip ties and do the exact same thing for a lot cheaper. My irrigation journey has not finished by any means. I'm learning more all the time, but at the end of the day, if you do it right and you spend the time in making sure that it's put in properly, it makes your life so much easier. Just like with those ferns that I grew way back in the day. You save water, the plants are healthier, and you have a lot more time in your hands. Yep. And one last thing. So there's a couple of different options that you have. So here is just the basic drip irrigation hose. So each one of these hoses is set up to have a certain amount of flow rate per minute. If you have a plant or something that you basically want to run water to, you can tie in to the main line, which I've done here with the smaller diameter hose, tied in, and then you can get these smaller drip devices here. Different colors are different gallons per minute. So I think this one is 1 gallon per minute. The water shut off here, that's why they're not dripping. But each one has a different gallon per minute. But it is dependent. So the more you hook up to the main water line, like I said, just like plumbing. So the more you hook up to the main water line, the lower your water pressure is going to be as it flows away. So, even for here, the water pressure is going to be highest as we're closest to the main water source. As we get further away, that pressure is going to go down as well as that flow. So for any system you set up, like I said, just like home plumbing, you have to basically look at how the system is functioning and then figure out if you need to make adjustments within the system. But there's all kinds of different packages you can buy online. Like I said, Rainbird's my preference, you buy at Lowe's, you buy it on Amazon, but there's a bunch of different options out there that you can choose.
Okay, like I said, that was just kind of an overview of what we've done at our house with the drip irrigation. I recommend anybody that's trying to just get started, you can go on Amazon, you can buy one of these basically drip irrigation kits. It has everything you need to get started. You can buy kind of the low end one for 30 bucks. I think the one you see here is probably around $60. But it's a nice way to get started. You know, it's not a huge investment. You can kind of figure out if you're going to use it, you can figure out how it works. But I just think in general, anybody that wants to get into it and kind of see what it takes, just pick up one of these kits rather than trying to buy all the individual components by themselves. So we got another video here of talking about some of these components and just kind of how you go about setting up the system initially.
We showed you kind of the starter kits that you can get on Amazon or go to Lowe's or whatever. Again, like I said, I like Rainbird, but there's Orbits, there's a bunch of other companies that you can get. So just to show you, at the starter kit, there's a few things that I like to have in my little toolkit beyond that. And you can see I got my little bucket. This is one of those things that I bought, drip repair and expansion kit. But what I have in here is, you don't need any special cutters, so it's not like cutting PVC. Good pair of scissors is all you need to cut the pipe. Zip ties, one of the greatest inventions ever. I love to have those. And then landscape fabric pins, I think are an absolute must. And so we'll walk through a little bit. So a couple other my tips is, you can see here, I bought a huge roll. Thank you, Elise, for helping out. I bought a big roll of just a straight irrigation piping. So it works similar to a hose. I'm going to use this to run across a field to water my pumpkins. But whenever you get this, it's going to be really coiled up like this. And you can see here, I just wound some of this out. It's all kinked up and like, oh, it's driving me crazy. My advice is, if it's warm outside, unroll it as much as you can. Use a couple of these landscape fabric pins the day before you want to put it down, and put it out there, and then stick these in there to hold it. Let it sit out in the sun. It's going to soften up. It'll be much easier to work with going forward. As far as putting all of the connections together, so if you're just getting started and saying, how am I going to do this? These are some of the different connections. So you got your T connection, you got your 90-degree. It's pretty easy to put these together, but my one advice would be, thank you, Elise. If you're going to put a lot of them together, take your time, don't rush it. You can see it's pretty easy to cut just with a pair of scissors. But putting these together is as simple as pushing them in. And again, if it's cold outside, this tubing is going to be much more rigid than it is if you heat it up. So same thing with both of these. If you leave these out, so if they're exposed to a lot of sun, remember those worm gears I talked about, put those on there, and they'll make sure that those seals are all tight. You may get some dripping out of this, which is fine. You can reuse these. So for some reason you decide that you want to pull this off, all you do is grab a knife and kind of cut along this edge. Just try not to hit the ribs on here. So if you kind of nick the ribs there, that's gonna be a path for water to come out. So as long as you're careful, you can take these off and reuse them. So just like Elise was here, so this is the main, like I said, this is kind of the main water line that you're gonna have, and you can put all of your, hook your drip line to this. If you do wanna go to smaller tube like this, whatever starter kit you have is going to come with one of these, and it's as simple as taking one of these T's. If you got a T, you stick it in the end here and grab the end of the tubing. So what you want to do though is you don't want to push it, so you want to hold the tubing so you don't go through the other side. So here, push it in there, it goes in, and make sure it's seated, and then you have that, and then you can grab another piece of your tubing and just stick it on the end. Like I said, some of these, especially like if it's cold outside, you have to push harder than you would if it's warm. Recommendation, like I said, if you have a lot of them to do, take your time. Your hands may be a little sore at the end, but then you have all those connections. One other thing I do want to show you is that a lot of times you put holes into these and you say, oh, I put the wrong hole there. You can take these out and they make these little caps like this, which is basically just a plug. So you can stick that in there and it'll plug. It may drip a little bit, but basically it plugs any hole that you may have put in there previously. So if we walk over here, I'll show you guys again a couple different options for closing off the end of these. You can use these. Obviously, you're going to pay a lot more. I said my recommendation is you just get a zip tie and zip tie them up. But if you're trying to winterize, just like plumbing, my recommendation would be at the end of the year, you take those off so that all the water can flow out of there. If it does freeze, it will burst the pipes just like you have at home, any kind of copper tubing that you may have. But like I said, I recommend getting one of those starter kits if you've never done it before. It has everything that you need in there to get going. Figure out what you need, and then if you need more stuff, you can go online or go to Lowe's or any of your home improvement stores and pick up everything. Yeah, so this is, like I said, the starter kits is going to come with a little bit of everything. You can go onto Amazon, you can go to Lowe's. Unfortunately, Home Depot doesn't carry much irrigation related stuff, but Lowe's does. And you can buy more of the individual components that you need. And next slide. Yeah, and just to show you, the whole idea of you can't just set it and forget it. While we were shooting this, I was walking along and I was like, man, is it wet out here? And so after we shot that last video, I pulled up that landscape fabric and you can see on the left that one of the pipes had burst. So it happens, that pipe's probably been in there 2 years. I think this is the first time that I've had a puncture in it, but it was simple. It's just cutting it and then putting a little coupling in there to fix it. And then at the end of the day, like I said, it's all about saving water. How much you're gonna have to water is going to depend a lot on basically how much rain that we're getting at an individual time. The importance of watering different crops also depends on kind of what what stage of their growth that they're in, and also the time of the year. So it's one of those things. It's not an exact science. You do have to go out there sometimes, and if it's really, really hot, then I can adjust my timer and do an extra watering period for a given day. If they don't need any water, I just go out there and turn it off to make sure that I'm not overwatering them and not underwatering them ideally. But basic rule of thumb is 1 inch of water per week. But really one of the benefits as well to if you do drip irrigation properly is you should have less weeds. So if you're not watering the entire bed and you're only watering where those plants are, the amount of weeds that are going to grow in those areas that you aren't watering ideally is a lot less as well. So I think that's the end of what we have. If anybody has any questions.
I don't think there's any questions in the chat. If anybody would like to, oops, we lost Faye. If anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question.
Amy, I do have a question.
Sure.
My question would be, Joe, is this something that you would advise, jumping with both feet in, or is it something that you could do like on a small scale and then add to? Is it kind of all or nothing, or?
I think it's definitely piecemeal. So like I said, you can spend $30 and just get one of those kits off of Amazon and just use it for a small little bed. You can use it for some of maybe just some plants that you have on your patio. It's definitely something that you can gradually do. And then as you learn and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't, you can expand But like I said, even with like a $30 starter kit, will give you a lot of what you need to do things on a small scale.
Good deal. Another question would be, can you talk a little bit more about, and maybe I just missed it, about winterizing? You said, you know, obviously if the pipes freeze, so you open up the ends. Do you do anything else to flush those out, or?
No, what you're supposed to do, just because there's small little orifices, the general kind of best practices are at the end of the year. Obviously, you disconnect any hoses that are connected to your irrigation system, and then open up the ends on all those. If you do have any areas that are areas where the pipe is, that's kind of a low spot, you know, and you have access to it, it's always good to kind of lift those up to drain out as much water as you can. And then ideally in the spring, before you kind of crimp the ends of those drip irrigation, is you basically just run water through it. So any dirt that has kind of accumulated over the previous year or over the winter, you basically flush all that out before you kind of fire things up in the spring.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, Joe, good job. Thank you. My beds are 18 inches tall, and I'm wondering how the water flow would do. You're having to go up and then, you know, across your bed.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue at all, especially, you know, if your water pressure is decent. At one of my other business locations, I use the irrigation for our baskets that we have out on the railing, and literally I take the water, I take it up probably almost 30 feet high, and then I run it across the roof, and then I bring it outside, back down, and then use it on all of our little baskets on our railing, and it's completely fine.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe, for presenting.
Yep, I'll get my brownie points later.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you all.